Please appreciate, Thoth is, he's one being, but he ushers us into this space. And at first, this is his temple. The temple is an extension of what people call the new earth. It's crystalline consciousness. It's crystalline consciousness telling a story that we breathe life into and become, and then life changes in the now. This one will change you. I give you Thoth. They thought of it as murder at first. They knew what they were doing, but they didn't understand the consequence in the way it exists. Life and death here play a very specific role in consciousness. It's not the same. It is not the same as it used to be. To appreciate the way you are changing, you must be with death. Death is simply a transition. The entire conception of death as an ending that potentially elicits a black, endless night, a void. Avoid this. It is not helpful. You must unify a new time with your conception of the end of the old. And when you live in this way, you have anticipations of what you will become that are more interesting than terror at what is leaving. And thus you experience your old way being torn away with joy in the moment. You still need to grieve. You still need, in some cases, to experience the poignant, painful reality of your skin falling away. And yet, your consciousness is no longer capable of vortexing onto these details of the transition, absent the hope in what is becoming. You have lived in an era when invariably a male figure dominated the minds of people around you. In some circumstances, several male figures competed for this dominance. In rare instances, a feminine figure took over. These were pivotal times with specific purpose, and yet they were not in equal measure. The reason you were not capable of transcending this pattern is that not enough was finished. You must appreciate what is happening here from a non-material perspective in order to be grounded in the material effectively. Otherwise, your perspective will consistently change, refocus, tip, shake, get bigger, get smaller. It is largely impossible to maintain a coherent inner vision until you ground yourself with your body. And you cannot ground yourself with your body until you appreciate why you are in your body. Try this. We were here before you were. We are beings that love being here. Simple enough. We work with her, and she crafts stories in relation to the math. There are seasons that are mathematically present on Earth. These seasons are generated by her relationship to the sun and the stars. Thus, a context was created. And within this context, we knew the times, plural, to invite you. You were invited in waves. You are present with people who you know as similar to you, who are not really similar to you. By being granted this specific ability to envision yourself within a body, within a lifetime, you have been put next to other people who have been taught to envision themselves within a body, within a lifetime. And thus, you earned the ability to see others as equals and thus prevent you from drowning in the overwhelming exposure to entirely different forms of reality. This is a crossroads of reality. This place and this time are a crossroads of many different realities. And these realities lead to specific places and times. Beings from some stars and from some clusters of stars gathered and came here together. And in their presence, they lived lifetimes. The different eras in which beings have chosen to incarnate here have offered them different depths of experience. And yet, when you do not believe in anything past the point you've been taught to know as death, you see yourself as similar to each other, similar enough that the differences seem to be accounted by the shape and the color, the hue of your bodies, the cultures you were born into, the languages. These are all attributions of an earthly existence. And because you have had these differences to focus upon, you have not had to engage the truth that the inner fluence came from the journeys that brought you here. By making the past irrelevant, you had the opportunity to focus on the presence of the energies of their movements. For in many instances, people are focused, peepholes are focused on no longer being present with where they have been. You are eternal beings. You must be capable of setting aside your previous experiences in order to be present with the experience you're in. And yet, your previous experience may be valuable to someone else. And this value is a gift. To accurately appreciate who you are giving your past to, you have to be exposed to each other for long enough to learn about what you do and you do not desire. Within this, you were given circles and clusters of existence. And these clusters needed their own coherence within the hue and the culture that they existed. And this coherence was largely generated by individual men. His story. The advantage of his story is that it is pointed and largely linear. This offered the opportunity for one form of polarity, a male consciousness, to have a specific purpose that would cut through the other influences and generate intentionality. This intentionality was deeply necessary within a swamp of possibilities, the gathered forces of the many places, the energetic presence of the stars. To bring coherence to this swamp, it was necessary to offer the ability to cut through consciousness with specific, pointed purposes, and thus the influence of the weapons. The weapons cut for hundreds and thousands of years. They cut people just like they cut grass. To us, the difference is not as dramatic as you would prefer it to be, because we see you from a perspective that knows full well when you have generated a life that is no longer worth living, and you will be better off on the other side of it. Yet to appreciate that this is how death works, you would have had to be able to see past the point of death, and to be able to see death in this more natural relationship where you are attuned to where you are going next. You would have to know where you are going next. And you have been too young and too new to do this. I teach you this in multiple ways, so you will forgive us the initial shock of the realization that we do not cherish your lives as much as you do. This can initially appear terrifying, as if we are predators who have played with you like a cat and a mouse. This is not the case. We have held you within the limits of your lifetimes, and it has been necessary for you to suffer in the tragic fear of the lie that death is the end. As you learn to see through this time, when you surrender your relationship again and again to the life you've been in, you get to start over in a new way. The purpose over long stretches of time is to generate a new form of presence here. It did not exist at first. There were plants and creatures, but there was not consciousness within a full range of spiritual dimension. This is you. You have been invited to be here to help create consciousness as an extension of the earth. She has grown an entirely new layer to her ecosystem. You have been creating this, and this creation has lasted between lifetimes. The spiritual presence of what you live has purpose. Every hue has generated itself, grown in depth, enriched in vibrancy, and woven more deeply with the earth herself. The trees and the fish and the birds die and rise again, and so do you. You must know yourself as part of what they are before you can truly live into the limits you are capable of living here. And to do this is to transition from knowing yourself as the being who came here to knowing yourself as the being who starts over here. When we seeded the rich consciousness that became humanity, We offered the essence of our own experience as the initial seeds. These seeds were set to grow, and we knew full well that they would rise and fall and rise and fall over the course of thousands of years. It was a path that we created before you placed your life force at the beginning of it. And as this path was traversed, you created more and more of a consciousness that was intentional. And this consciousness took form and grew like fiery, spiritual flowers. Not only did you grow the flowers, you grew the garden. Not only did you grow the garden, you grew the potential to grow the kind of gardens that humans are. You are a wild, flowing flower of fire. This fire is a spiritual presence that's alive. As you learn to recognize it and invite it into your body, you will thrive.